Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever time you're watching this, I hope you're having a really good day. This presentation is basically going to review the mystery genre. We're going to pick up again on character, conflict, connection, and theme. The character today will be Jake. We haven't talked about him a lot. The connection will be small communities. And whether you want to consider Mount Marty itself a small community, your dorm a small community, you grew up in a small South Dakota town, or you grew up in an apartment building that might be considered a small community, any or all of these things, I think, will tie together and make a connection as we look at some of the wording. We'll also take a look at trying to connect to some of the things that may have been Kruger's source for some of the phrasing. The first thing I want to look at is the mystery and kind of review some of the things we have done before with a mystery novel. This book won the Edgar in 2014 for Best Novel. The Mystery Writers Association is the one that gives out the Edgar. It's named for Edgar Allan Poe, who wrote the first mystery novel. And the question I have is, what makes this a full-fledged mystery? We know that there are deaths. We know that we have to find out who killed Ariel. But I'm not sure that this novel functions as a mystery in the same way that The Cold Dish functioned as a mystery. There it was very clear that the murder of Cody Pritchard was the driving force of all of the action. Here, there seems to be a lot of characterization and a lot of things about faith, a lot of things about World War II, a lot of things about growing up and coming of age that are way more important than the mystery and that drive the plot more than the mystery does. Nonetheless, it won an Edgar, so let's look at it as a mystery. There is a perfect crime, as in the sense that we don't know who did it. As I said before, I don't know if the purpose is to have the reader solve the puzzle. I don't know if any of the detectives are the main focus of this thing. And all of the amateur detective isn't really there. We do have some inept cops. There are some false arrests. But this doesn't seem to be enough to fit the traditional. And certainly, we're not even going to think about trying to turn it into a hard boiled or a police procedural by any stretch of the imagination. I don't know if the clues are presented early. We have some misleading clues. We have some false accusations. To the best of our knowledge, Frank is not lying to us about the details. Upper class folks, most of the people we're dealing with live on the flats, and we're not going to have anybody gathered together where Sherlock Holmes or any other famous detective explains how the crime gets solved. I'm not sure there's enough here to make this a traditional. As I said, it's not a hard boiled, it's not a police procedural. There is a formula called the Cozy that has a small town, a limited number of suspects, no sex or violence, limited profanity. But Cozies also have their own little thing where some of it I've read, the protagonist is really stupid. I don't think Frank is stupid. He's young, but he's not stupid. They always have a pet. There's no pets here. There are other elements of the Cozy that aren't here. And so I'm not sure that this follows. And second, Cozies are usually a series. There's like 10 or 12 or 15 books in the series. Kruger has a series of detective books, but this isn't it. This is a one shot, and I don't think it fits the Cozy element either. It's up to you to determine whether this is a mystery or not, and we'll talk about it perhaps more at the end. But right now, I think it's makes me wonder, what makes it a mystery. I want to go back and talk about the fact that it won an award because it's a well-written book. And that, I think, is important as well. Let's take a look at Jake. Frank tells him that Jake is the best friend, that he is his brother, that they're going to stick together throughout. And I think that this is an important element, that brothers fight, brothers argue, all sorts of bad stuff happens with the brothers, but at the same time, we're still dealing with this idea that they are friends and they are sticking together during this moment of tragedy. Now, remember, brothers being best friends doesn't mean they don't fight. We started the novel with "You're not coming, howdy doody." We've started the novel where he is where Frank ever so often leaves Jake kind of left behind here, where he pushes Jake into certain situations Jake doesn't want to go. Excuse me for a second while I once again commit philosophy without a license. I think it's important to understand that Aristotle had three friendships. There was the friendship of utility, there was the friendship of pleasure, and there was the perfect friendship or the good friendship. The friendship of utility has people doing things and being friends just because they need each other. You need somebody to help you move out of your dorm room. You need somebody to help you, do your homework. You get along, but you don't socialize. You don't find much pleasure. You are friends because you do things for each other. Then there's the friendship of pleasure. You enjoy each other's company. You may not ask them to help you move. You may not ask them to do anything for you. You just like getting together, having a few laughs. You enjoy each other's company. And then there is the perfect or good friendship that encompasses everything and that is good in and of itself. It encompasses pleasure, it encompasses utility, but it doesn't exist for either of those things. It exists because you see the person as an end unto himself, as I mix philosophers here, not a means to gain pleasure, not a means to get work done. Jake and Frank, I think, have that perfect friendship. That brotherhood creates that perfect friendship. One of the things to look at is, what is the friendship between Nathan and Gus? Is it that same sort of thing, or is it a very high level of utility? They just need each other. I think there's a contrast between Jake's friendship with his brother and Gus's friendship with Nathan. And perhaps it is this perfect and good friendship because they do lift each other to a higher level through the practice of utility. I'm not a good enough philosopher to go there, but it is something to think about. Jake also, I think, has a prophetic voice. And prophecy here is not predicting the future. Prophecy is revealing the truth. And I think it's important here that Jake utter these words, but for her, he's God. And Jake has seen something that Frank couldn't. He understands something that Frank can't. And that does make him a prophet. That makes him somebody who can reveal a truth that his brother needs to see and that we as readers need to see. I don't know if Kruger was going here, but I do think perhaps there's this connection to Moses. Exodus 4:10, Moses says, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. Jake is a stutterer. He too is slow of speech and tongue. And Moses led people to a truth, led people to a promised land. Jake seems to be doing that, leading people to a truth, leading people to a promised land. Again, I don't have any idea whether Kruger was going for that connection, but I think it's a valid connection to make, and it's something that all of us can think about as we look at these characters. From 1961 to 2023, I think that these words are absolutely positively true. In a small town, nothing is private. Word spreads with the incomprehensibility of magic and the speed of plague. I'm sure that's true at Mount Marty. It was true in my small hometown. It's, one of the times recently when my mother was taken by the ambulance, my aunt, who lives 8 or 10 miles out of town, texts me before the ambulance got to the nearby town 6 miles away. I'm positive of that because somebody who was taking care of my mother called her. And people seem to know what's going on all the time. People seem to know when we arrive in town before we're past Main Street. Small town, nothing is private. But I don't think that this is a brand new idea in 61 or in 2023. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's a really old idea. 33 BC, from a book, The Aeneid, written by the Roman poet Virgil. Rumor is the swiftest of all evils. Speed lends her strength, and she winds vigor as she goes. Small at first through fear, soon she mounts up to heaven and walks the ground with head hidden in the clouds. Swift of foot and fleet of wing, a monster awful and huge, who for many feathers in her body has as many watchful eyes. Wondrous to tell, as many tongues, as many sounding mouths, as many pricked up ears. By night, midway between heaven and earth, she flies through the gloom, screeching, and droops not her eyes in sweet sleep. By day she sits on guard on high rooftop or lofty turrets, and affrights great cities, clinging to the false and the wrong, yet heralding truth. This is what's happening in the novel. This is what happens in small towns. This is a bit of a connection. And I think Kruger's phrasing wants readers who are familiar with Virgil to think about Virgil, to think about the Aeneid, to think about rumor being the swiftest of all evils, being a plague. I think I'm going to wrap it up here. One of the things I want us to do is connection and character and build on that. I think these connections, they build on things that Kruger is doing. I think the character development is important. And again, remember, the idea of Jake as a prophet can tie back to the title of Ordinary Grace and the idea that prophets reveal a truth and that truth can lead to grace. I hope all of you have a good day. Hope to see all of you in class next class period.